So my job is to tell you a little bit about some of the problems that retailers are experiencing and consumers are experiencing with delivery and why delivery choices need to change. So I want to start by telling you a story to give you an analogy in relation to this. So most of us go to McDonald's, but we don't admit it. And the fact of the matter is, when we go to McDonald's, the first thing we do is we go through drive-through is we tell ourselves that we're only going to get a hamburger and small fries, or at least that's what I do. We all do it, and we all mean it, and we're committed to it at the moment. And then we get around to that amazing ordering process, and there are all these beautiful images on the screen, and you still say to yourself, all you want is a hamburger and small fries, and a Coke Zero, because we're all very healthy people. And then what happens? What happens to me is I get there, and I order a large Big Mac meal, but with a Coke Zero because I'm a really healthy person. And then you go around to the next stage and you pay, and that experience is gorgeous as well. You also order an apple pie, and then you actually get to the checkout and they hand over your food and you drive around the corner. And as you're leaving the McDonald's, you say to yourself, I know I'm going to bring that stuff and I'm going to eat it at home, but I think I might just have a look at it now, and I might just have a couple of chips, even though I'm not that sort of person who lives in their car. But you do it anyway, and then you find that the apple pie is missing, and you are just pissed off, and everything is just wrong. And that is what an e-commerce purchaser's experience is when they get a bad delivery experience. You don't get that dopamine high, you're just unhappy. It doesn't matter that everything else before was beautiful, wonderful purchase experience, quick processing, received your product, but if something was missing, you're not happy. That is what most customers are experiencing at the moment when they have a poor delivery experience. So e-commerce continues to evolve, right? And the expectations of the customers and also the retailers have changed, right? Retailers understand that the experience is no longer just about having a really sexy shopping cart. It's not good enough anymore. You really need to make sure, if you want to keep those customers with you, that their experience finishes at the time when they receive their product. And the fact of the matter is, you see a lot of great retailers who package these products up really well, and they focus on the out-of-box experience. The problem is, if delivery has let that experience down, the customer is unhappy. So we wanted to do some research and really understand what the customer's experiences really are around delivery. And so we did a survey recently. We surveyed about 2,500 Australian online shoppers. And what I want to do is share with you some of the feedback that we got from them and how we think it impacts supply chain. Before I do that, thank you, Stephen, for the short introduction on Hub. But just to reaffirm, we're actually a tech company that happens to have a collection point network. We have about 2,200 locations across Australia, and we've done deals with National Storage, PAK&SEND, 7-Eleven, and a lot of independent convenience locations. We focus on ensuring that people have access to our products and our collection points 24/7, over the weekends as well, at a time that's convenient for them. The focus is really on providing convenience for that customer. We also have networks in New Zealand, we also have a network in the Philippines, and we're currently opening up 3 other Southeast Asian networks, and later on next year we hope to have about 9 additional markets where we're providing these services. And we do work with all of the major carriers. So anyone who moves consignments, we work with. We're an agnostic network. We're happy to move parcels on behalf of anyone, because the reality is most consumers do not know who's actually moving that parcel for them when they're doing an e-com delivery. They're just concerned about receiving their goods in the way that they expect it. So customers are evolving, right? The pandemic has pushed more and more people online, and the research suggests that those people are going to stay online. In the last 3 months, 91% of Australians purchase something online. And we find that more and more of these purchases are happening within these sales spikes. And as you can see on the screens, there are some pretty important periods. Obviously, Christmas is an important period. Mother's Day, very important period. And more we're seeing some of these sales programs that retailers are pushing. So Black Friday, end of financial year. Sadly, Valentine's Day just ain't doing very well. And it looks like it's going to stay that way. Delivery delays are a universal experience. 73% of Australians have had parcels take longer to be delivered than was stated in the order. And the two leading drivers for that sit around the fact that sometimes it's simply just inconvenient to collect that parcel from a post office, and sometimes the parcel simply has taken longer than they should to be delivered. Now I'm going to defend the logistics industry for a moment. The fact of the matter is, if you have COVID and you have a booming e-commerce business and you have limited employment and limited ability to take on new people to maximize that capacity, something has to give. And what's actually been given, what's actually suffered, is the ability to deliver things on time. And that's a reality, and I will defend any logistics company that's going through this. It's just unreasonable. Something has to change. And until the market can flex one way or the other, I think these delays and this situation is here to stay. But for the vast majority of consumers, quite frankly, they don't care. They placed an order, they expect a certain delivery service, it's not happening, and they want to understand why. Over 60% of customers choose same-day delivery, not because they need it, but because they believe they have to pick same-day delivery to get a parcel delivered within 2 to 3 days. Now what that means is it creates further capacity constraint. In other words, I'm ordering something and I want it same day. I don't need it, but I believe unless I order same day, I won't get it for 2 to 3 days. And that just creates more and more pressure on the industry and more requirement to provide additional delivery services. It's also coupled by the fact that 15% of the respondents that we spoke to said that they've had a parcel stolen. And our research tells us that only about 53% of Australians actually have a safe place to leave parcels. So this creates another conundrum, right? If I'm placing an order and I'm not sure if I'm going to be at home, do I want it delivered to my home? Do I then ask for more expensive services because I want to make sure that I receive that parcel in the timeline that I was stated? I know I'm going to be home tomorrow, so I definitely want it next day. I'm not prepared to wait 2 or 3 days. Or am I just unsure about whether that parcel is going to be delivered? And there's actually been a bunch of research done on the anxiety that is created by missed parcels or people's uncertainty around the delivery of parcels. And the reality is that uncertainty, when it comes to the delivery, actually gets reflected back onto the retailer. And the retailer, to a large extent, is actually blamed for some of these poor delivery experiences. So we really do think that there are some things that we need to do to improve that. We also believe that if people have a choice about their ranking of how they would like to receive a parcel at home, authority to leave is always number one. Everybody wants that parcel, sorry, I said that wrong. Signature on receipt is number one. I want to receive my parcel, I want to sign for it, I want to know it's there. But more and more, and because of COVID, we move towards this authority to leave experience. So we're just going to drop the parcel off. And that's where a lot of these concerns around parcel theft come from. And that's where some of these anxieties that are generated around parcel delivery come from. Now the reality is, in our market, parcel theft is not as bad as we may make out. It's nowhere near as pervasive as it is in some other markets around the world, where in some instances it's quite a strategic event. There are vehicles and gangs that actually follow courier vehicles around to take their parcels. We're not there yet in Australia, but everything comes eventually, right, I suppose. But we're not there yet in Australia, that's just not the case. But there is a high level of anxiety around parcel theft and delivery. And so obviously the higher the value of the product that you placed an order for, the more concern you have in this area. So what do people prefer to do? First thing they want is, I'll have signature on delivery, please, that's my preference. Second preference, if I can't have that, especially if it's a high value item, is I'll pick it up from a collection point or a post office. Third preference, if I have no other choice, is leave it outside, and I hope that it's going to be there when I get home. For 60% of Australians, that's fine. They typically have a safe place to leave things. For some of us, we don't. And then there are some other challenges. There are high-rise buildings that we have, a lot of us live in now, that actually don't even have post offices or locations available for delivery. So these cause other problems. We then start to have things delivered to the office. Some organisations are now saying they don't really like parcels being delivered to the office. There are OH&S concerns within the mailroom, and so the problem just continues to exacerbate. So if not home, where do you want things delivered? Well, the majority of people through this research have actually said that they would prefer to be able to deliver their parcel during the week after work. So on the way home, or typically on the way home from work. And then you've got to think about what's most convenient for that and what are the most convenient environments for that to happen. And I'll talk a little bit about that more. A growing percentage of the population, because we've done this research year on year, are now saying they're quite happy for things to be picked up on the weekend. But ideally, that would support delivery on the weekend. There are some people who do a great job of delivery on the weekend at the moment, not everybody. A couple of rather significant marketplaces who do a good job of delivery on the weekend. And we see this as something that's going to become a little bit more pervasive. But there is the opportunity to deliver to alternate locations so that you can pick up your parcels on the weekend. 30% of people want no change, they're happy, they've got a great place for everything to be left, they're comfortable that nothing gets stolen, deliver it to my house, I don't want any other services. Delivery price strongly influences the shopper behaviour, and that shouldn't be a surprise to all of us, or any of us, and that's just reality. 83% of shoppers say they're likely or highly likely to use a collection point if it was the cost was cheaper or free. Now, we may all say, well, you know, that makes sense, but there are some people, it doesn't matter what the price is, just deliver it to my house. So I'm not interested in any price reduction for those deliveries. The reality is, though, as we think about it from a supply chain perspective, if you can drop parcels off in density to a single location, then the actual cost of those deliveries to that point is less than an individual delivery to each home. Therefore, there should be a price differential between picking up from a collection point and home delivery. If we're able to drive that price differential through to the customer, then we can actually create more capacity within the supply chain and then improve our service levels. So we think there's a congruence of benefits there if we look at where people are given the option to have more delivery choices based on price. Now, returns is without doubt the ugly secret of e-commerce. No one really likes to talk about returns, and returns continue to grow. The reality is we've got generations moving through right now who are just very comfortable with ordering 10 things at a time and knowing full well that they're going to send 9 back. And the reality is that's a cost to retailers that they need to absorb. I'm sure everybody here doesn't do that. I would never do that. I buy one shirt at a time, and I'm not looking at anyone in particular and suggesting that they would buy more than one thing, buy a bunch of stuff, take photos on Instagram, and then send them all back the next day, and are absolutely upset when somebody has the audacity to ask them to pay for it. But that is the reality of the environment that we're living in at the moment. 71% of people who purchase online sent an item back as a return, and 44% of them said they found the experience only okay, right? And 23% of us said that they found the experience quite difficult. The problem with that is it reduces stickiness to that retailer. If you've done, again, a wonderful purchase experience and you're now giving them a hard time on delivery, either forward or back, you potentially lose the capacity to re-engage with that particular customer. So retailers are really looking at how do they do a better job of streamlining the returns experience, whilst also giving their customers a sense that, listen, this isn't a free economy and these are things that they need to pay for. And you're starting to see a shift worldwide. Zara announced earlier on this year, for the first time ever, that they will now charge you for a return. And I think that was followed by Boohoo.com. Does anyone know who Boohoo.com is? Good. Shouldn't know who they are because none of us should be buying that sort of skimpy outfit. But they are now starting to say that they will no longer accept free returns. And I believe that you're going to see more and more of that. It's just ridiculous to think you can buy whatever you want and not pay to have stuff sent back. Now, there is some really interesting stuff in this area. There's a lot of stuff being done around AI. So a lot of retailers are getting really smart to this, and they know fully well that you keep buying from me and you keep buying 10 items and sending 9 back. So I will now ban you specifically from being able to do a return. And they actually told me about that, about you particularly. So we know that those things are going to change, and we expect that to be more pervasive, and we think that that will improve supply chain and will improve the efficiencies and reduce the constraints that we currently see in the marketplace. People love the idea of sustainable shipping, but they don't want to pay for it, right? And this is one that I find really interesting. I've got an 18-year-old and a 18-year-old and a 16-year-old daughter and son. They're constantly lecturing me about the way I live my life and how I'm completely and utterly don't have any respect for sustainability, and Dad, you shouldn't eat that, you know, or you shouldn't drink that, that's destroying a panda somewhere and you're doing the wrong thing. And then I say to them, if that's so true, how come you don't know how to turn off a light switch in the house, right? And that is what's going on. Everybody wants to talk about sustainability and everybody's very passionate about it, but no one wants to pay for it, right? And it's about time that we have those two conversations together. The fact of the matter is, if we said to a customer, do you realize that by paying an extra $2, you can have this particular consignment delivered in a carbon neutral way. In fact, you're helping us increase density, so you're reducing congestion and you're reducing CO2 emissions. It will only cost you $2. No thanks, I'll take the carbon, please. Just keep sending it to me the way that you did before. So I do think there's a bit of an education that needs to be done around the way we talk about sustainability. And I think that the reality is that needs to be tied with the actual efficiency that happens within the logistics supply chain for last mile, because there are cost benefits and they should be passed through that way, and we can talk about the sustainability benefits from that perspective. Consumers do, however, have a higher propensity to buy from retailers who state their sustainability credentials. They feel better about purchasing from those retailers. The problem is that sometimes retailers talk about sustainability and they do the whole greenwashing thing, and it's not really true what they're actually promoting. And I do think we need to get better at the way that we certify retailer sustainability credentials in this country, so that people actually know exactly who they're purchasing from and who they're supporting. Now, according to the Carbon Reduction Institute of Australia, having your parcels shipped to a collection point actually reduces carbon emissions and congestion by about 50% on home delivery. And obviously I run a collection point network, so I'm really proud of that. And the first question I get asked when I say that to people is, well, hold on, don't I have to drive my car or whatever to go and pick that parcel up? The reality is most people, when they collect parcels, they collect it within a pre-existing journey. So in other words, the courier company has dropped off 50 parcels to that BP location, and the people who are picking those parcels up pick them up on their way to work or on their way home from work in the vast majority of instances. Therefore, it's not an additional journey, and that's why there's a reduction in emissions and congestion versus that courier van continuing to drive around. Everyone get it? Thank you, because I spent a lot of time trying to explain that, and for some reason people find it difficult. So we believe there are a bunch of problems that are worth solving when it comes to last mile delivery and creating more delivery options. The problem is delays, and what delays is doing is it's increasing the demand for same day delivery when people don't actually want same day delivery. They are just asking for that because they believe that's how they get their parcel within 2 to 3 days. if you don't have secure locations, and then what's happening is the driver is creating a missed delivery, sorry we missed you card, and then another repeat visit back to your location for another delivery. That increases capacity constraints. If there are no price differentials between collecting a parcel and delivering a parcel, then there's no real incentive for a customer to not ask for a home delivery. That again creates less collections, and that creates more delivery constraints. The more that we allow pervasive returns, the more that customers expect couriers to come and pick those things up from their homes. That creates more capacity constraint. And the less that we are focused on the fact that leveraging collection points actually is good for the environment and drives sustainability, means that people will still continue to demand parcel delivery at home more often than not, and that creates higher deliveries, and that creates capacity constraints. So based on the feedback from this survey, we realized that we have these problems, and ultimately all of these problems really talk to capacity constraints. I want to draw your attention to something else. Just about every time we go online to a website to buy something, there are 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different ways to pay, but typically only 2 ways to deliver. So you can pay on every credit card on the planet, you can pay with 16 different buy now, pay later programs, you can pay by PayPal, I'm sure that if you ask, you can send a check with a pigeon. You can take any model that you want to pay. And then there's only 2 ways to deliver, fast or slow. And the reality is, if you really want to give the customer as many options and you want to keep them as sticky as possible, you should give them as many ways to pay, but you should also give them more options around delivery. And that actually is just smart from a retailer's point of view, because it creates more stickiness to that particular site. There is a reason there are 8 ways to pay. They want to give you all those options. So we should find as many ways as possible to give people an option around delivery. So let's think for a moment about new delivery choices. I spoke a lot about collection points, and I should also speak about hyperlocal delivery from retailers or logistics hubs. And within our network, for example, we have a bunch of pick-up, drop-off collection points. We also have logistics hubs, and that enables carriers and logistics companies to drop off parcels in bulk into our location so that we can do hyperlocal delivery on their behalf, either to our collection point network or to home if required, right? The more that logistics hubs become available, and the closer the consignments are in volume to the closer the consignments are to the customer base, actually means less individual deliveries, better sustainability, and more cost effective, more efficiency within supply chain. We have a relationship with vicinity shopping centres, for example, around the country, where we can have carriers drop consignments off to the centre, and then they can deliver to retail or do hyperlocal delivery with our delivery fleet partners to customers within a 5 to 10k radius of those centres. Now, most logistics organisations do not have hubs right in the middle or right in the dense areas where people live. And shopping centres are trying to find more and more ways to be relevant to e-commerce as they see the shift from offline to online purchasing. And these are some of the things that they're working on. And so I generally believe that if we can all work together and start to think about how we can drive even more efficiency in the last mile, logistics hub is going to be an important component of that. So, what do collection points do? They create density, and that density in logistics creates capacity. And in addition to that, it improves your die-foot rates, delivering full on time, and reduces deliveries and pickups whilst consolidating volume. And we think that this is just a simple component of the answer to making last mile delivery more efficient. There is no doubt in the coming years there are going to be 2 delivery types as we've seen in other markets. Delivery to home will become more and more a premium experience. And you'll have more and more of an option. There's this price for home, and it will be a price that makes delivery time efficient for B2C delivery. And there's this price for collection, and that will make it more efficient, and there'll be a better price benefit on this because there's a cost reduction to support that. So where does Australia sit as we look at all of this? Across the world already, in many markets, out-of-home collection is quite pervasive. In the Nordics and in Europe, for example, there are many markets where about 40% of all parcels are collected out of home. They are not, it's just not home delivery. And people have come to treat that as standard. And part of the reason that they're not home delivered necessarily is that there is a price differential between those two experiences. Australia is still behind. Now, there are some mitigating circumstances in our country. You know, we are well dispersed, density and concentration of population isn't the same as the metrics in some other markets, but there is still plenty of room for this model to change. So we are convinced, based on the research and the things that we see, that there is going to be more and more out-of-home delivery, price differentials for those services, and more focus on some of the benefits of that from the perspective of carriers, retailers, and consumers. I'll close by saying this. Retailers who are focused on convenience for their customers will consider collection points and leverage hubs for additional delivery choices. Carriers will have a direct benefit because they will benefit from the consolidation and the efficiencies that they will gain from providing these delivery services with cost reductions. Retailers should be able to start seeing a differing price point between home delivery and delivery to collection points that should be passed on to the customer to further improve people's desire to use those services. We generally think that collection points and logistics hubs will create more convenience, choice and control for consumers, drive efficiency, as I said, for retailers, for the logistics industry rather, and for retailers finally create those additional delivery choices that they need so they can really offer customers the kind of experience they want in the car. Thank you very much.